All right, so today we're diving into something that's been making a lot of headlines lately, and that's generative AI, or Gen AI, like everyone's calling it these days.
Yeah, Gen AI, it's everywhere you look, right?
It really is, and we're going to be focusing specifically on how it's going to impact, or really already is, impacting the workforce in Latin America.
Right, because it's not just a Silicon Valley thing.
Exactly. It's a global phenomenon, and Latin America is right there in the thick of it.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got this fascinating research paper that we're going to be using as our guide today. It's called Buffer or Bottleneck: Employment Exposure to Generative AI and the Digital Divide in Latin America.
Catchy title, like.
Yeah, it really grabs your attention, and it kind of gets at the heart of what we're going to be talking about today. Is Gen AI going to be a good thing for workers in Latin America? Is it going to create jobs? Is it going to destroy jobs? Or is it going to be some kind of a mix?
Well, and how does the whole digital divide thing play into all of this?
Right, because Latin America, they're facing some pretty unique challenges when it comes to technology access and adoption. So are they going to be able to keep up with this Gen AI revolution, or are they going to be left behind?
Big questions.
Yeah, lots to unpack today. So let's just jump right in. This study, right off the bat, it says something like 30% to 40% of jobs in Latin America and the Caribbean are exposed to Gen AI in some way.
That's a lot.
I know, it's a big chunk of the workforce, but what does exposed even mean?
Well, it doesn't necessarily mean those jobs are all going to vanish overnight.
Right, right.
What it means is that Gen AI has the potential to change those jobs in some way.
Okay, so it could be anything from like automating a few tasks to completely replacing the entire job.
Exactly. It's a spectrum.
So not necessarily a robot apocalypse, but definitely something to pay attention to.
For sure.
So, okay, so what about the jobs that are at risk of being completely automated? Like, what does the study say about that?
Well, they estimate that something like 2 to 5% of jobs in Latin America are at high risk of being fully automated because of Gen AI.
2 to 5%. That doesn't sound like a lot,
It might not sound like a lot when you say it like that, but
but that's still a lot of people.
it is. You're absolutely right. Even a small percentage represents real people's livelihoods. And we can't forget about that human impact.
Absolutely. No, you're right. Okay. So, I've seen a lot of headlines about AI and jobs, and some of them have been pretty like doom and gloom, like the robots are coming for our
Oh,
jobs.
yeah, we've all seen those headlines.
But then you've got other reports that are all like AI is going to create 1 million new jobs. So like, how do we make sense of all of this?
Right. Well, it's important to remember that not all studies are created equal. They use different methodologies, they focus on different things. Some look at how many tasks in a job could be automated, others look at the overall impact on productivity.
So like comparing apples and oranges, basically.
Pretty much. It's tough to make direct comparisons.
Okay, so that's fair. So what are the TIG things we should be thinking about when we try to sort through all of this information?
Well, one key takeaway is that the type of job matters a lot. Some jobs are just inherently more exposed to Gen AI than others.
Okay, so like, what kind of jobs are we talking about? Give me some examples.
Sure. So the research consistently shows that jobs in urban areas tend to have higher exposure to Gen AI than jobs in rural areas.
Okay, that makes sense. Like more tech companies, more people using digital tools already, that kind of thing.
Exactly. Also, jobs that require higher levels of education tend to be more exposed.
Interesting. So the more skills you need for a job, the more likely it is to be affected by AI.
That's the general trend, yeah.
Okay. What else?
Well, younger workers also tend to be in jobs that are more exposed to Gen AI.
Oh, wow. So it's like the people who are already pretty comfortable with technology are the ones who are going to be most affected by this new wave of technology.
It's a bit ironic, isn't it?
It is. So does that mean that like people who are already doing well, they're just going to get even further ahead and then everyone else gets left behind?
That's a real concern, and it's something that policymakers are definitely grappling with, especially in Latin America, where you already have high levels of income inequality.
Yeah, it's a big problem. Okay. But this study isn't all like doom and gloom, right? There are some potential benefits to Gen AI, aren't there?
Absolutely.
Didn't it say something about Gen AI actually boosting productivity in some jobs?
Yes, exactly. The study actually found that a significant number of jobs across various sectors in Latin America could actually benefit from what they call productive transformation with Gen AI.
Okay. Productive transformation, so like robots doing our jobs for us.
Not quite. It's more about, think of it like this Gen AI becoming a tool that helps people do their jobs better.
Okay, so like instead of a robot replacing a teacher, the robot helps the teacher do things more efficiently.
Exactly.
So like what kind of things are we talking about here? What sectors could see these kinds of benefits?
Well, they highlighted a few sectors in particular, like education. Imagine teachers having more time to focus on individualized instruction because Gen AI is helping them with administrative tasks or grading.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. What else?
Healthcare. Gen AI could help doctors with things like diagnosis and treatment planning.
So doctors could spend more time with their patients.
Right. And also things like personal services and customer service.
Okay, so basically any job where there's a lot of repetitive tasks or data entry, Gen AI could help streamline things.
Precisely. And that could lead to increased productivity, better outcomes for everyone involved.
Sounds pretty good, but hold on a sec. Here's the big questions.
Yeah,
Can Latin America actually pull this off? I mean, they have a massive digital divide, right?
right. That's a major factor here.
Like lack of internet access, lack of digital skills. How can they even begin to think about using Gen AI when they're missing those basic building blocks?
That's the million-dollar question, right? It's a real dilemma. And this study actually has some pretty interesting findings about that.
Oh, okay. So, like, what did they find?
Well, on the one hand, a lot of the workers who are most likely to be impacted by Gen AI, whether positively or negatively, they're already using digital technologies in their jobs.
So they're already kind of on the front lines of the tech revolution in a way.
Exactly. Which could mean that those impacts, both good and bad, they could happen a lot faster than we think.
Okay, wow. That's interesting. So what about the other side of things, like the people who aren't using technology as much?
Well, that's where the digital divide really becomes a problem. The study found that the lack of adequate digital infrastructure is a major roadblock to realizing the positive potential of Gen AI.
It's like having a Ferrari but no roads to drive it on.
Perfect analogy.
It's a shame. So it's not just about worrying about jobs being lost. It's also about missing out on all the good things that Gen AI could bring.
Exactly.
That's a tough spot for policymakers to be in. Like, how do you even begin to address all of that?
It's a complex challenge for sure. The study really highlights the need for like a multi-pronged approach.
Okay, so, like, what would that look like?
Well, first and foremost, governments need to think about how to protect workers who might lose their jobs because of AI.
Okay, so things like unemployment benefits, job retraining programs, stuff like that.
Exactly. And also making sure people have the right skills to work alongside AI. Investing in education and training programs is key.
Yeah, because you can't just throw people into the deep end of the tech pool and expect them to swim.
Right, you need to give them the skills and the support to succeed.
And then, of course, there's the whole digital divide thing to tackle.
Right, that's a big one. And it's not just about access, it's also about affordability and digital literacy.
So investing in better internet infrastructure, making sure it's affordable for everyone, and teaching people how to actually use technology effectively.
It's a big task, but it's essential.
It is.
If Latin America wants to truly benefit from Gen AI, they've got to address this digital divide head on.
Right. Because otherwise, they're just going to be playing catch up forever.
Exactly, and that's not a position anyone wants to be in.
No, it's not. All right, so that's a great overview of kind of the landscape, the challenges, the opportunities. And next, we're going to be digging a little deeper into some of those policy solutions that we just touched on. So it's like they're kind of at a crossroads, right?
They are. It's a crucial moment for Latin America to really figure out how to make Gen AI work for them, not against them.
And the choices they make now are going to have a huge impact on their future.
Absolutely. It's a microcosm of what's happening globally, in a way.
How so?
Well, this whole Gen AI thing, it's not just a Latin American issue, right? It's something that all developing countries are going to have to grapple with as this technology becomes more widespread.
So what they do in Latin America could be a model for other regions.
Potentially, yeah. It's like a test case for how to navigate this new technological landscape.
Interesting. So, like, what are some of the big takeaways, do you think, that other countries can learn from what's happening in Latin America?
Well, one of the biggest lessons, I think, is that you can't talk about AI without talking about the digital divide.
Right. It keeps coming back to that.
It does, because investing in digital infrastructure is absolutely essential if you want to even have a chance of harnessing the power of AI.
So it's not just about, like, expanding internet access. It's about making sure that access is actually good enough to support all of these new AI tools.
Exactly. You need internet that's reliable, that's fast enough, you know?
Because what's the point of having access if you can't actually do anything with it?
Exactly. You're just going to get frustrated. And then there's the whole digital skills piece of the puzzle.
Oh, right. Because it's one thing to have the internet, but it's another thing to know how to actually use it.
Absolutely. And this is where education and training become really important. People need more than just basic computer literacy. They need the skills to actually use technology effectively in the workplace.
Like data analysis, coding, that kind of thing.
Exactly. And those skills, they need to be constantly evolving as AI technology continues to change.
Right, because AI is not a static thing. It's constantly evolving. So the skills that people need are going to be constantly evolving too.
That's right. And the workforce of the future, they need to be comfortable working alongside AI, They need to understand its limitations, but also its potential, and they need to be able to use it to their advantage.
It's almost like we're talking about a whole new kind of literacy here, right? Like digital literacy plus AI literacy.
Yeah, I like that. It's a whole new way of thinking about education and job training.
So it's not just about teaching people how to use today's software. It's about giving them the skills to be able to learn and adapt to whatever comes next.
Exactly, because the jobs of tomorrow, we might not even know what they look like yet.
And we've been focusing a lot on the practical side of things here, like the skills people need, the infrastructure that needs to be built. But what about the ethical side of all of this?
Oh, right, the human element.
Yeah, exactly, because AI is a powerful tool, but it can be used for good or for bad.
That's right. And that's why it's so important to have these conversations about the ethical implications of AI.
So, like, what are some of the big ethical concerns that we should be thinking about?
Well, one of the big ones is how do we ensure that AI is used to empower people, not replace them, you know, or to undervalue human work?
Right, because we don't want to create a world where robots are doing all the jobs and humans are just sitting around twiddling their thumbs.
Exactly. And we need to be very intentional about how we design and implement these systems. We need to think about what kind of future we want to create with this technology.
And that future, it shouldn't just be driven by, like, what's technologically possible, right? It should be driven by human values.
Absolutely. We need to be asking ourselves, what kind of society do we want to live in? What are our values, and how can AI help us achieve those goals?
So it's not just about building cool new AI tools, it's about making sure those tools are used in a way that benefits society as a whole.
Precisely. And that brings us to another really important policy consideration, which is social safety nets.
Oh, right. Because even in the best case scenario, some people are probably going to lose their jobs because of AI.
It's true. And we need to be prepared for that. We need to have systems in place to support those workers and help them transition to new kinds of work.
So things like unemployment benefits, job retraining programs, maybe even some kind of basic income support.
Exactly. The goal is to make sure that people aren't left behind as the nature of work changes.
So it's about creating a system that's both innovative and compassionate, one that embraces progress, but also protects the most vulnerable.
I like that. It's a balancing act, for sure, but it's one that we need to get right.
Absolutely. And that requires a shift in mindset, doesn't it?
It does. We need to move away from this fear-based narrative around AI.
The whole robots are coming for our jobs thing.
Yeah, exactly. We need to start thinking about how we can use AI to make things better for everyone.
So instead of robots are stealing our jobs, it's more like, how can we use robots to create a better future?
I like that. It's about focusing on the opportunities, not just the challenges. And that requires a much more proactive approach from policymakers. They need to be anticipating the impacts of AI and putting policies in place to manage those changes effectively.
Which is no easy feat when you think about how quickly this technology is evolving.
It's a challenge, for sure, but it's not impossible. And there are some concrete steps that governments can take.
Like what? Give us some examples.
Well, we've talked about addressing the digital divide already, and that's a huge one, but it's not just about infrastructure and skills, it's also about incentives.
What do you mean by that?
Well, even with the best internet access and training programs, people and businesses aren't going to adopt new technologies unless they see a clear benefit, right?
Right. So how do you make it worthwhile for them to go digital?
Well, governments can offer things like tax breaks for businesses that invest in AI or subsidies for low-income families to get internet access. They could even fund programs to promote digital literacy in underserved communities.
So it's about creating an environment where going digital is actually rewarding.
Exactly. You need to make it appealing, and it takes a collaborative effort. Governments, businesses, civil society, they all need to work together to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to benefit from this digital revolution.
It sounds like a pretty ambitious undertaking.
It is, but if there's one thing we've learned from this deep dive, it's that tackling the challenges of AI requires bold thinking and decisive action. We can't afford to sit back and wait for things to happen.
We need to be proactive, not reactive.
Exactly. The decisions we make today are going to have a huge impact on the future of work, not just in Latin America, but around the world.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about the nuts and bolts of AI, the challenges, the opportunities, the policy solutions. But there's one really important piece of the puzzle that we haven't really touched on yet,
Oh, and what's that?
the human element.
Ah, yes. The often overlooked but arguably most important piece of the equation.
Because technology is a powerful tool, but ultimately it's up to us, as humans, to decide how we use it.
So true. And that's why it's so important to be really thoughtful about the social and ethical implications of this technology.
Right. Because we need to make sure that AI is used in a way that benefits humanity, not the other way around.
Exactly. And that means thinking about things like how do we make sure that AI is used to enhance human capabilities, not replace or devalue human labor? How do we make sure that it's used to promote fairness and equity?
We need to think about the values we want to embed in these systems.
Absolutely. What kind of future are we trying to create? What kind of world do we want to live in?
It's a big question, but it's one that we all need to be asking ourselves as we navigate this new world of AI.
Well said. It's not just about the technology, it's about what we do with it. It's about our values, our aspirations, our vision for a just and equitable society.
It's about remembering that technology is a means to an end, not the end itself.
Well said. As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listener with a question to ponder. In a world increasingly shaped by AI, how can we ensure that technology serves humanity rather than the other way around?
That's a powerful question, and it's one that we all need to be thinking about as we move forward into this uncharted territory.
It's a question that challenges us to think critically, to question our assumptions, and to be willing to have those tough conversations about the kind of future we want to create.
Because the future is not predetermined, it's something that we create together.
Well said.
It really is a lot to consider. And it's kind of exciting too, right? We're at this point where we have a real opportunity to shape how this technology is developed and used, to make sure it actually works for us, not the other way around.
It is an exciting time, and I think this deep dive has been a good starting point for these kinds of conversations. We've been able to explore some of the really big questions around Gen AI and how it could change the way we work, not just in Latin America, but everywhere.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, from the specific impacts on jobs in Latin America to the broader challenges of the digital divide and the importance of thinking about the ethical side of things. It feels like we've only scratched the surface, though.
There's always more to uncover and explore, but I hope our listener is walking away from this with a better understanding of both the possibilities and the responsibilities that come with this technology, especially when it comes to Gen AI.
So as we wrap things up here, what are some of the key takeaways that you hope our listener will remember about Gen AI and its impact on Latin America?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is that this isn't just a technological shift, it's a societal shift. Gen AI has the potential to completely reshape the way we live and work, and those changes are already starting to happen in Latin America.
And it's all happening against the backdrop of existing inequalities and challenges in the region, like the digital divide that we keep talking about.
Exactly, which is why it's so important to think critically and carefully about how we implement these technologies. We need to make sure that Gen AI is being used in a way that creates opportunities for everyone, not just a select few.
Right, so it's not just about developing the coolest, most advanced AI tools. It's about making sure those tools are used in a way that actually benefits society as a whole.
Precisely. It's about taking a really proactive approach to managing this technology, anticipating those potential impacts, both good and bad, and putting policies in place that help to support both technological progress and, more importantly, human well-being.
And, it sounds like Latin America might actually be in a unique position to lead the way when it comes to figuring some of this stuff out.
I think so. The fact that they are already dealing with these issues head on could give them a unique advantage as other parts of the world start to face these same challenges down the road.
It's like they're getting a sneak peek at the future of work and figuring out how to navigate it in a way that's hopefully going to work for everyone.
Exactly. And those lessons, they're going to be valuable for everyone, not just Latin America.
So for our listener, as you continue to learn about Gen AI and how it's changing the world, remember that this isn't just some abstract, far-off thing. This is happening now, and it's going to affect all of us, one way or another. And we all have a role to play in shaping how this technology unfolds.
Absolutely. Stay curious, stay informed, and most importantly, stay engaged in these conversations. That's how we're going to figure this out together.
That's a fantastic point. I think that's a great note to end on. So to our listeners, as you continue to explore the world of generative AI, remember that you have a voice and you have power. Use it. Be curious, be critical, be engaged in the conversations that are shaping the world around us, because this is our future. We get to decide what it looks like.
Couldn't have said it better myself. It's been great diving into this with you.
Likewise. And of course, a huge thank you to our listeners for joining us on this deep dive into Gen AI and Latin America. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep questioning.
Take care.